Welcome to Evolve to Succeed, the podcast that brings together entrepreneurs, founders, business leaders and experts to talk about their journeys and explore the link between personal and business success. I'm your host, Warren Munson, founder of Evolve, a coaching, training and development company focused on enabling business and personal success and creating a community of like-minded individuals. Whether that be through our peer groups, one-to-one coaching, our training and development programs for you and your teams, or through our content and events, our mission is to get the best out of each individual and inspire them to be better both in life and in business. If you want to learn more about Evolve, including our beautiful co-working space in Ashley Cross in Poole, then please go to evolvemembers.com, where you'll find great content, insights, details of all of our services, and also information on our forthcoming events. For now though, let's get on with the show. Welcome to this week's episode. Today I'm talking to Darren Colley, Managing Director at Iracroft, a supplier of metal pipe and tube fabricated products for a diverse range of industry sectors. As well as his role at Iracroft, Darren is also an ambassador for the Institute of Directors and sits on the Regional Advisory Board of MakeUK. Darren is a self-professed, results-driven senior executive. As you'll hear, he has a great aptitude for organisational transformation, which includes identifying new business streams, reducing time to market, and minimising costs while boosting quality and client satisfaction. I therefore wanted to get him on the show to discuss his experience, but also to cover topics from what he learned from 22 years of military service, the value of not being afraid to ask, and the skill to getting people's buy-in, as well as the principles of strong leadership, enhancing staff satisfaction, and why he decided to complete an MBA. Enjoy the show. Welcome, Darren, to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Thank you, Warren.
I'm excited about our conversation today. There's so much we're going to touch on, I'm sure. You've had 22 years of military service and then success over a relatively short space of time in the commercial world. And I'm sure we'll come back to that military experience and what you learned from it in due course. But maybe for some context for our listeners, can you give us listeners an insight into what you've done in the commercial world since leaving the military?
Yes, okay. So, as you say, we'll come back to the military in a little while, but I realised before I left the military, I only had 3 O-levels, so I had to do something. I did an OU degree in environmental sciences before I left the military, and I did, as part of my resettlement, a Prince 2 exam, Foundation and Practitioner, which is project management. I left the military and I was enrolled into a Siemens project management course, which allowed me to then become the project manager supporting offshore platforms in the southern North Sea off of Great Yarmouth.
Okay.
So I basically project managed all of the maintenance. If you imagine, if you go offshore, you have to take everything with you, from nuts, washers, bolts, all the tooling, because
you can't just call on a van
you
to
can't
turn
go
up
down,
with what you need.
You can't go down to Screwfix. So I did that for 3 years. That was my first civilian job. That got me used to working in a civilian environment, which coming from a military environment is very different.
Yeah, we will definitely discuss that adjustment.
Yeah. And then, so that was as part of a Shell contract with Siemens. I then moved up to Aberdeen. I got promoted to run the contract between BP and Siemens. So this is all the rotating equipment that BP had offshore that was Siemens related. When I say rotating equipment, I'm talking about gas turbines, generators, gas compressors. So this is the compressors that suck the gas out of the North Sea, compress it and throw it onshore. So that was a very exciting time, supporting some platforms up in the North Sea. Got offshore a few times and saw how the guys live offshore, which isn't a particularly friendly environment. And then BP decided to award Dresser-Rand some of the work that Siemens was doing, on the conditions that Dresser-Rand employed me as the contract manager. Okay. So I swapped over to Dresser-Rand, ran that contract again for probably 18 months, nearly 2 years. And then we had the oil and gas crash in 2015, where the price of oil fell through the floor. So in a mad panic, me and the wife upsticked and moved from Aberdeen to Gloucester.
Okay.
Where I took over as general manager of a engineering facility belonging to Sulzer. Sulzer are pump manufacturers based in Winterthur in Switzerland. They had bought a huge workshop down in Bristol. So I had 3 P&Ls. I had the pump P&L, that was their service centre pump P&L. They had an electrical rewind shop, which was rewinding electric motors. And they had this big, sort of heavy industrial mechanical workshop set up mainly to overhaul the large rollers and other large pieces of equipment from Port Talbot. Unfortunately, when I got there, because obviously I hadn't done my due diligence properly, because it was a bit of a mad panic to get out of Scotland before we couldn't sell the house, I was there to close it up, turn the lights off. There was 90 people working there, and obviously relied upon it for their
income, their lives.
So I looked at this and I thought, I'm sure that this has got potential. I'm sure that we can pull this around. So I went to the headquarters, which was in Birmingham at the time, of Sulzer, and said, look, give me a year and I'll turn it around. Let's keep it open. There's 16 service centres in the UK, and this is the worst performing service centre. You could understand why they wanted to shut it. I said, just give me a chance. They said, well, you've got 8 months. So, right,
got
okay.
2/3 of what you wanted.
So I literally got back from that meeting to be told that Tata Steel at Port Talbot was going to sell up. So they were going to stop spending, which was 35% of our income. So that compounded the problem. So I didn't really have a proper fully laid out plan. All I know is I bought some time for the business to try and I found myself about a month later over in Galleons Reach, which is the DLR, Docklands Light Railway overhaul facility, servicing facility, and we used to rewind some motors that go underneath the seats for the heaters in the DLR.
Okay.
And as I went in the car park, there was just a mountain of bogies. So bogies are the things that hold the wheels onto the train.
Okay, yeah.
So and I said to and this is how lucky I was. So I was talking to my contact about these motors, and I said, what's happening with those bogies out there? And just as I said that, the mechanical engineer was walking past the office, and my contact said, hold on, I'll ask. So he asked him, oh yes, these things are cracked and we haven't got a repair scheme, so we're having to buy new ones off Bombardier, I think it was.
Okay.
So I said, well, what would you say if I said I could repair those? I didn't know if I could. And he said, well, it'd be brilliant. So anyway, I took the drawings back to Avonmouth, and yes, we won the contract to overhaul and repair these things. Very, very difficult, because these things come in a group of 3, so they bring the train in, jack the train up, rip these bogies off, strip them down, take the wheels off, and they go off to be refurbished somewhere else. And then you've got 14 days before this train is then put back onto the bogies. So in 14 days, we had to bring them back from Galleons Reach, get them into a spray shop in Bristol, get them sandblasted, fully NDT'd at our facility, crack mapped, welded up, back to the spray shop, sprayed, and then back to Galleons Reach within 14 days. So we were actually sending these things back, and they were still drying in the crates as they were going. We changed all of our processes. We took a load of welders on. We built these big frames where you could bolt these things into, and then you could turn them over and around so you could get to all the areas to weld. And it brought in a huge amount of money. I mean, a phenomenal amount of money. And just as all that happened, just as we started taking these in, Port Talbot then came back online and said, right, we've got all of this work that we've put off because we were going to close or we were going to shut, whatever. We need to catch up. So absolutely swamped.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because that opportunity came from that inquisitive mind and just having a conversation. Exactly.
It was just luck.
Is it luck?
Well, I suppose you make your own luck, don't you? To a certain extent. If I hadn't asked, we wouldn't have got it. But as far as I'm aware, they're still doing them now.
Okay.
And this was 2016.
Okay.
And my worst performing service centre became the second to best service centre in
a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, in 2.5 years. So yeah, I was really, really pleased about that. That was really good.
And what did you learn about yourself in that specific experience?
I think, looking back on it, don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to make a fool of yourself. So I hadn't promised that we could fix these, but I said, look, we will have a look, and if we can, so I took all the information back, and getting people's buy-in. So I took them back, and of course, my team at the time said, well, we don't do this, we do rollers. I said, look, we've got to diversify here.
Do something different,
Otherwise, we're all going to be out of a job. So getting them on board, talking them around.
Yeah. How did you change that culture? Because there must have been quite a negative culture at the time for it to be that
bad.
Poorly performing.
Yes, yeah, it had been badly managed previously and all sorts. So it's having confidence in what you're doing and saying. So people will only follow you if you have gravitas, if you have the confidence that they believe in. And I've noticed that throughout my civilian career is you've got to be stable. You can't have mood swings. You've got to be nice and stable, regardless of how bad things or good things are getting. You've got to have that gravitas to be able to pull it off.
Yeah.
You've got to have a good argument.
Yeah.
You've got to
have logic.
Yeah, logic behind what you're trying to do. And I think that's it, really.
And how do you think that? Because that's interesting, isn't it? Because in the commercial world, you have to create followers, don't you? Because and using all of those skills that you've outlined there. In the military, how does leadership change? Because typically, I've never served in the military, so maybe you come from a place of ignorance here. Is you'd expect people to be more akin to followers because they've joined the military for a purpose and a cause. So how have you seen your leadership style need to change between the two, and how would you compare and contrast?
So you're right, in the military you're expected to be led.
Yeah.
But there is still a certain amount of you get good and bad leaders within the military, and I
suppose you do it in every walk of life.
Every walk of life. The people who expect respect and who expect to be leaders and aren't very good at it will fail in the military because they will not gain the following that they require. So it's not as black and white as possibly people think when they look into the military. You still have to have a certain amount of skills, leadership skills, management skills, to actually bring people along with you. There does get to that point where you need complete and utter obedience when things are really intense. But day to day, you need this. You still need to work at being a leader. You can't just expect to be followed.
Yeah.
And that will also tell in those times when things get really intense. People who have respect for the person that they're following will react a lot quicker than people who have no respect for that particular leader. So it's not. Yeah,
it has a lot of similarities.
It has a lot of similarities. Yeah.
But when under pressure, do you think it's easier to lead in the military than in the commercial world? Because again, in the commercial world, everybody sort of retreats to their own place of safety.
Quite possibly. But then I have never, and I will never, experience the pressure of leadership in the civilian world that I've had to.
Absolutely, I recognise
that. You're right. But there's two ways of dealing with that. So for COVID, for example, I started at Iracroft 6 weeks before the first COVID.
And that was your next role after?
No, I went to Hydreco after Sulzer. Okay. So that was purposely sought out a business that needed changing. So Saul's was my first business turnaround.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. So my next role was as director of Iracroft. Now, Iracroft were being sold out of a private equity fund.
Yeah.
So they obviously wanted to get the best price for it. So I had 18 months to really grow the business.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting. So that was trying to get long-term contracts, getting the business packaged right so that we could sell it, being part of the sales process, interviewing potential buyers.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting process. And we did. I went out and got some large MOD contracts that are 25 years long, which were ideal. If you got those on the books. So the PE company got more money than they thought for the business, and that was
success. And then that brought you to Iracroft.
Iracroft, yes.
Brought you down to Dorset.
Yes, yeah. So Iracroft was in Poole anyway.
Oh, okay, right.
So not too far to move. Slightly different. So Iracroft belongs to the daughters of the founder. So the founder is a guy called Tim Bamford, who was the original JCB's brother.
Okay.
So they were brothers. Tim Bamford opened a business to supply his brother with hydraulic pipework.
Yeah.
He died, I think, in 1992 and left it to his daughters, and they've been our owners ever since. I think long term they'll look at to sell the business. I can't speak for them, obviously, but they wanted somebody to come in and reinvigorate the business, which again sort of interested me. So and we've obviously we survived COVID.
Yeah, well, that's where we sort of took a diversion, didn't we? Yeah. So leading through COVID and how that compared.
Yeah, so usually when I like to lead collaboratively.
Yeah.
I like to use the intelligence and the people around me. They're there to do their job. They know more about their job than I do. So why not allow them to flourish and get on with what they want to do? But sometimes, and COVID was a good example, nobody's got any experience of that. No. So you've got to make. We're all blind. So somebody's got to start making some decisions. Yeah. So that was a little bit of a departure from what I usually do. So it's very sort of autocratic. Right, this is what we're going to do. This is how many people we're going to furlough, and this is how we're going to bring them back, and then just using that time, the whole of the sort of summer of 2020, me and my team just constantly having meetings around what do we need to do with the business? How can we reset the business? How can we best use this time to look at processes and all that sort of stuff? So we actually came back from COVID a lot stronger than we went into it.
Okay, so it gave you that time to stop, reflect, adjust.
Yeah, and sort of hit the reset button, really. We did stay open throughout the whole of the pandemic. We were lucky enough that there's a company just up the road from us who build hospital beds, chairs, screens. They couldn't cope because they'd won all of the Nightingale Hospital contracts, which meant we were key workers, so we could stay open. Yeah. So what we did was we rotated the workforce back through. We'd bring them in for 3 weeks, then put them back onto furlough, bring another lot in, just to keep everybody engaged, make sure everybody was confident that they had somewhere to come back to after all of this had finished. If it did finish, obviously we didn't know at the time. But some of the decisions that I had to make then were very autocratic, and it was this is what we're going to do.
But that's about good leadership, isn't it? Changing your style to fit the situation. Mm-hmm. That reflects too.
Exactly. I do get asked a lot, especially having been in the military, what's your leadership style? My leadership style is always very situational. It's what situation are we in? Yeah. That dictates of how you lead through that.
Yeah, definitely. And greatest challenges, putting COVID to one side, faced in terms of Iracroft and the role you're in now?
I think, again, a culture. It's a 50-year-old business. Yeah. We have people that have been at the business for 50 years. seen a lot of MDs come and go.
Here comes another one.
Yeah, here comes another one. He's going to bring his new broom in and all of that. So, yeah, it's all about getting people on side. It's about, as we talked about, sort of being truthful, being honest, being steady in how you deal with people. And I think the culture is always the most difficult thing to change in a business. You can change processes, you can change the P&L and all of that, but actually to change the way people see the work that they're doing and how important they are. So, yeah, we've done a lot of work around that.
And how have you changed the culture from, what was it and what is it now, and where would you like it to be?
Yeah, so we started off a bit on the back foot, really. Obviously, we had COVID to deal with, but when we came back, it was obvious that we had to change what we were doing as a management team to try and get people more engaged. So all the way through COVID, every week I would do a Teams broadcast to all of the employees, telling them how we were getting on, giving them an update of any of the COVID regulations that were coming out, just to try and keep people engaged. And we've sort of built on that. So we have a works council. We're not unionised, but we have a works council. So we constantly in contact with them about what they want us to do. One of the big things that came out of COVID was that people wanted to go onto a 4-day week.
Okay. And how many team members have you got?
So in total in the business we've got now 280 people.
Wow. Okay.
When I started, we had 165.
So you've gone through dramatic growth.
Oh yeah. We've half the size of the business again.
Okay.
So we've gone from 14 to 21 million.
But you had this desire for a 4-day week.
Yeah, it was brought to us by the shop floor. So we looked at it and we thought, how can we do that? So what we'd done is the shop floor do their 38 hours a week, but in 4 days. So they do 4 long days. We used to work 4.5 days. And we found that the Friday morning, by the time the guys came in, set the machines up, had the coffee, talked about what they're going to do for the weekend, it was time to tear the machines down and all go home. So we were losing some efficiency there. The guys wanted, they understood that excuse me, that Friday morning was not really effective for them. So we put them onto a 4-day week where they do their 38.5 hours. And we get a huge uptick in overtime on a Friday. So we pay overtime on a Friday, time and a half. So the guys get the opportunity to earn more. They still get their full weekend.
Yeah.
Obviously, as any business, you will always get people that will work all hours God sends, But what we've done is the office staff, because obviously we still have customers that work on a Friday. Yeah. So my office staff do 4.5 days.
Okay.
But we don't open the office on a Friday. People work from home because after COVID, everybody's got laptops.
Okay.
And we also, for the office staff, we say that everybody's got to be in on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then my team pick what other day of the week they want their team in. There are certain roles like engineering, quality have to be in all the time when the shop floor's in, but we can adjust for that. But it gives us a nice. I was afraid that if we went to a 4-day week on the shop floor, we'd end up with an us and them type
thing. Which is in a manufacturing engineering entity. Yeah, that is a constant battle.
So with the office staff, if they say, well, look, the shop floor is only doing 4 days a week, and I say, well, yes, but you're doing 4.5, but you're working from home 2 days a week, or 2.5 days a week. They haven't got the opportunity to do that, and of course, on the flip side from the shop floor, the office staff get to work from home 2 days a week. Well, but they're working 4.5 days. You're only working 4. So,
and how have you? And has it had it? Because it's quite from engineering manufacturing business. That's quite a transition, isn't it? There's a lot of creative professional services type businesses moving towards that 4-day a week model. But I've heard of very few manufacturing businesses doing it. Has it? What have the benefits been? Are you able to recruit more people? Is it?
So there's a lot of benefits. So recruitment is one.
Yeah.
Retention, quality of life for the people. If they only want to work 4 days and they want 3 days off, they get a lot. There are some downsides that if anybody's thinking about doing this, I'd watch for. The first one is you can only run 2 shifts, days and nights, because you haven't got long enough days to run 3 shifts.
Okay.
So you can't do 3 8-hour shifts. You can only do 2 12-hour shifts because of the length of the days.
Yes.
So that's a bit of a problem. If you've got expensive capital equipment, you run the risk of not using it 3 days a week.
You're kind of underutilising it.
So you're not sweating your assets. So that can be a problem. Most of our assets are sort of weld kits and all that, which aren't, we don't need to sweat so much. So there are a couple of downsides that you should be aware of.
Yeah.
But overall, from a staff satisfaction point of view, and that was the moment when we started to see, or we had a plan of how to change the culture. So that'd been on the table from the Works Council for about the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So we looked at it and said, right, can we make this work?
Right. This is obviously of real importance.
Yeah. And then from then on, it's all been around staff communication.
Yeah.
So we have a very, very good staff newsletter called The Pipeline.
Okay.
That my commercial manager puts out once a month. It welcomes all the new people. It has anniversaries on it. We have been running a meet the team type thing. So we've been asking people to give us their whole life story. It started off with me, obviously, and it's gone all the way through. We're still running those. Any sort of social events that's happened. Me and some guys did a tour of the Southwest on motorbikes a couple of weeks ago. That's going to go in this edition. So it's all things like that, just keeping people engaged.
Cool.
And
it's interesting, isn't it? Because we all think in this modern world, this technology world, that we've got to do things fresh, new and innovative. But sometimes that stuff around, actually a lot of the time, around employee engagement, it's some of the, I'd call old school stuff. Like newsletters and like just proper communication that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the big differences we made, we've got tea and coffee machines throughout the business. When I got there, it was subsidised, but you still needed 10p.
Okay.
And we came back from COVID. Who has cash on them? And it was like, this is ridiculous. Just make them free.
Yeah.
And it costs us, I think, $7,000 extra a year. It's nothing.
It's incidental, isn't it?
And it's things like that. It's things like the vending machines that we've got. We changed them all to swipe cards. Yeah. Again, because nobody's got any cash. And it's just those things. We started at the I think about midway through 2021. We started what we called our people project. So what I wanted us to do is understand from the time the guy turns up to the car park or the lady and does their work and gets back into the car, what's their journey, what's their day like, follow them around, look at what they're doing, look at what is niggling them, and how can we change that? And that was the vending machines, the coffee, and
it's a good way of thinking about it. What's the irritants in the day type
exactly
thing.
It's not just watch what these people are doing and talking to them, asking them. I mean, you get some ridiculous ones, I want to get paid £50 an hour. Well, yeah. But a lot of it is all around just engaging with people and understanding what their needs are and why they are coming into work. Yeah. I didn't want people just to come into work just because they had to. No. I wanted people to come into work because they wanted to talk to their mates. I want to give them time to talk to their mates. I want them to have a bit more of a social time. Definitely.
And so it is sometimes, it's just those little, right, it's always, usually it's those, in terms of client service, employee engagement, it is those little things, isn't it, that make a huge difference. And where's the growth come from then? Because I assume turnover has, grown in the same ratio as employees and
so the growth, basically when I joined, our relationships with our customers and our suppliers was not very good. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time rebuilding relationships with our customers, rebuilding relationships with our suppliers, and it's organic growth. We haven't taken any new work on. It is purely just more of what we were doing. We opened a paint line, which was all over LinkedIn, powder coating paint line, because in 2020 we identified that our customers, especially JCB, take a lot of what they call structural tube work. So this is grab handles, roll cages, things that hold the mud guards on. It's all tube, all has something welded on the end, which is what we excel at. It just doesn't carry fluid. Yeah. But the majority of that is powder coated, we plate all of the hydraulic tubes. So we opened a £1.5 million paint line to start building structural tube work. We haven't opened it yet because we've been that busy. We haven't got the capacity to actually build it. We've got JCB queuing up to give us work,
right.
Structural work. So we are just going all out to employ people and get people in, and we're going to possibly take over a new building. And
okay. And how are you overcome? Because I mean, a lot of people listening to this podcast will see that they could have growth in their business, but they can't recruit. There's that war on talent kind of still ongoing post COVID. By the sounds of it, you're still restricted. You still want to employ more people. There's still more opportunity, but you have succeeded in recruiting. What do you think you've done differently to perhaps others? Okay,
so traditionally we've been a minimum wage business. We're not anymore.
Okay.
So we've rejigged the pay scales to ensure that we're not in that position. We've opened our welding academy.
Okay.
So we originally we would either recruit qualified welders, or we'd take people on as apprentices and teach them how to weld. A welding apprenticeship takes minimum 32, 36 weeks, something like that. So last year we experimented and we just took some people in, got one of our top welders to teach them and see if we could actually teach them to weld to our standard. All they get is a certificate from Iracroft saying what they've done. This is no sort of formal outside qualification. It's like a company approval. And we found that we could. So we opened part of one of our buildings as our Weld Academy. We took 6 people in at the beginning of January this year, with the expectation that it would take us 3 months to get them to the point where we could put them into our production facility. The first tranche, which included a guy who used to work in a bar, never picked up a welding torch before. None of these people had. So it starts off very simply, this is the welding equipment, this is the before use inspection, and it goes through a bit of the theory about it, but not too much. But it's all about hands-on skill. And anyway, after 8 weeks, they went into our production facility. So we did another tranche of 6. They were equally as successful. And we're on the 3rd tranche now, who are current Iracroft employees who want to go into welding.
Okay, so they're going to make the transition, and then you'll backfill their roles, which will be easier than the shortage.
Exactly. And the whole idea was that we would have this welding academy, and then in September we would open it up for 12 apprenticeships.
Yeah.
But what we've realised is actually we don't need that. We can bring people in. We can turn them around. We can make them into skills that we require in a much shorter space of time. We still run welding apprenticeships, but we run them down at Paul and Bournemouth.
Okay, so just stay with that, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think we've all got to think of different ways of bringing those skills we need and the people we need into our businesses, because they're not readily out there, and there's not an expectation that's going to change anytime soon. So it's great to see those initiatives you've undertaken. You've also undertaken some personal development yourself.
Yes.
And you completed an MBA in 2016, so during that course of some of those challenging roles that you had. What's the importance to you of personal development? Okay, so
I made the decision to do an MBA because I realised that actually somebody of my age, my peers, have been in a commercial world for 30, 35, 40 years.
Yeah.
35, I'm not that old. But of course, having been in the army, not in a commercial environment at all, I was lacking experience. So I needed something to bring me up level with my peers.
Yeah.
And the only way I could do that, you can't make experience, so I had to do something else. So it was the MBA route that I did. It was a MBA based around oil and gas, because at the time when I started it, I was in Aberdeen. Midway through, I had to move down to Gloucester. So, yes, it was a really, really good course. It's really vocational. It really does. If anybody wanted a course to do that, I was really impressed.
So I'm going to ask you 2 questions.
Yeah.
Do you wish you'd come out of military life earlier, because 22 years of service is a proper
Mm-hmm.
time served. Now with your experiences in the commercial world, do you wish you'd come out earlier?
I often think if I'd left the military earlier, would I be more successful now?
Yeah.
The thing is, the military gave me a lot of the skills that I'm using now to be where I am now.
Well,
so,
yeah.
it's no good looking backwards. You know, I'm glad I did what I did in the military. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I got to see and do some incredible things, and it gave me the skills to do what I'm doing now. So.
Okay, which leads on to my second question is you talk about, okay, I had to do my MBA because I needed to skill up, I needed to get some knowledge that I didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
But what advantages do you think you now bring to the commercial world and skills you bring to the commercial world because of 22 years of service?
Yes, I think the leadership thing that we've already spoken about, which is, you know, sort of almost ingrained in you in the military anyway. But I think being able to relate to people, to be able to talk to people, to be able to have decent relationships. I mean, when you get to MD level, everything is about relationships. People buy off people. People work for people. You know, it's all about how you treat and how you portray yourself to people. So it's all around that sort of relationship and that personability. Now, in the military, because you're always dotting around, you have to get on with people. Whether you particularly like them or not, it doesn't really matter, but you have to get on with them because you have to, you know, you have a job of work. So I think that really does help.
Okay, those personal skills.
Interpersonal skills, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, as well as the sort of leadership and all that sort of stuff. But the interpersonal skills that you learn within the army is something that's probably overlooked a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting, yeah. We've had a few ex-military, you know, on the podcast, but that's the first time somebody's reflected on that as an experience. And I can absolutely see it from
especially in the job that I did in the military, where you would get posted on your own. So if you join maybe an infantry battalion, you will get posted all together.
Yeah, you've got that camaraderie, we are a team kind of thing.
Whereas I was a helicopter engineer, you get moved around on your own. You'll still see people that you know from previous, you know, postings and all that, but you're still getting dropped into these situations where you've got to get on with people. And I think
interesting. I think you've spoken a lot during the course of our conversation around communication, leadership style, and all of those kind of things. One of the challenges that I think we all face is being consistent.
Yes.
And I'm getting the impression that's probably one of your strengths.
Yes.
So how do you get that? How do you maintain that consistency?
Okay, so I'm very aware of how people view me.
Yeah.
Not in a way that is, I'm not trying to be up myself.
Not egotistical.
Not egotistical, but I'm very. So when I'm in a situation of stress, when there's a lot of going on, COVID, for example, remaining calm, remaining consistent, I think is something that all leaders should be able to do. I don't think you're going to be leading if you're stressing around, running around with your head on fire. You know, you've just got to be very. You may be having sleepless nights, but you shouldn't let that onto your team, because they'll feed off it.
Yeah,
you know, if you're calm, if you're collected, if you've got a plan, however, you know, sort of rough that plan is, if they believe that you can get them through this, then they'll be on side. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah,
that's definitely what you bring day in, day out, is however you're feeling inside, show up
throughout the whole of the pandemic. So all of my office staff were working from home. 2/3 of my staff were furloughed. I still went into the office every single day. Because the guys who were working had to see that the boss was there. That was it. I wasn't doing anything. I was just drinking coffee in my office, you know. I mean, there's nothing happening. But I had to get down on the shop floor, make sure they all saw me, you know, make sure they could see I wasn't panicked, make sure that I had a plan. I didn't. Obviously, nobody had a plan.
Trying to work one out, but
I think that's how you can really lead. You know, I'm lucky because I've got probably a different perspective on stressful situations. I can safely say I've never been stressed since I left the army.
Yeah.
Things happen. You can't.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, different perspective.
Absolutely.
I'm really also now intrigued to, during the course of this conversation, learn, you've had that very much the Siemens, the corporate experience. Mm-hmm. You've had the PE experience, and now, effectively, you've got owner-managed family business.
Yes.
Now, they're three completely different environments. And I don't really know the question to ask, I suppose, but it's, what would you take as the benefits? Let's go positive. What would you take for the benefits from each of those three environments?
Okay, so the big corporate, the benefit is that there's a huge amount of support.
Yeah, resource support.
Resource, you haven't got to think about things like that. You need something, it happens. So that's probably about the only positive, actually. I don't think I could go back to the corporate world. I think that would be difficult. I think it's too confining.
Yeah, because although you've got that resource, you're following a path.
You're
and
absolutely in that pigeonhole.
Sign off. Yeah. That's your role. That's what you do. Yeah. Don't step outside.
Don't leave your pigeonhole. The PE-backed business. That's very interesting because obviously they want their pound of flesh. So slightly different to the corporate thing, where if you need something, you can put forward a good business case, and you can sit down and they can say, yes, we'll get some return off of that. So it's all about ROI,
about financial return. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if it's a good idea and it gives you some return, you'll more than likely get buy-in. Other things that don't give return, building maintenance and things like that, very, very difficult to get.
Different view of
But it depends on where in the cycle they are in the if they just
came in late into the cycle, so it would have been all about numbers.
Absolutely, but really, really interesting to be part of that. And then where I am now. It's just a fight for everything, but it's not bad, It's we're very, very lucky. Our owners are very standoff. They are more than happy to allow me to get on with the running of the business. So I'm very.
And do you feel more of a custodian for them?
Yeah, I'm very aware it's their business. Very aware it's their business, and I owe it to them to be as careful with their business as possible. But I still think there are opportunities where you have to take a certain amount of risk, calculated risk, like the bogies for Sulzer, for example, like the paint shop at Iracroft. We will be opening that over the next couple of months. So yes,
and that will then lead to exponential growth again.
So it's all part of the growth plan. Yeah.
So many listeners of this podcast, are owners of businesses themselves, may be thinking that they'll step away slightly, one of their kind of optimization exit routes may be actually take a back seat, run it as a lifestyle, bring an MD in to push the business forward. What hints and tips would you give to a business owner bringing in an MD for the first time?
Okay. Don't be overly surprised if he wants to change some of the team.
Yeah.
People have different ideas, and people can get very stagnant in their roles.
Yeah.
So if you've got, and I'm just taking this for an example, an FD who's been there for 20 years, a new MD who comes in might decide that FD is not up to the job. It depends really if the owner is looking to sell, or is looking to grow, or is just looking
find out the purpose, I suppose.
Yeah. So be very very direct with your incoming MD about what you want the business to look like in 3 years, 5 years. At least have a plan, or if not, say give me a plan. Allow him to go away and come back with a plan. Or if you want to sell it in 5 years, or if you want it to sell it in 3 years, these make real big differences to how you run a business. Because if you want to sell it in 3 years, you've only got a short window in which to grow it to its maximum, steady it, because you're going to find it very difficult to sell a business that has a massive spike in the last 3 years, because it's going to fall.
Prove its consistency, and growth brings its own stresses and strains, particularly on things like culture and engagement and employee retention.
Exactly. And if you've only got a short space of time to do that, you need to be open and frank to the MD about that. If you just want to grow it, that's, with no sort of end in sight, that's a nice position to be in, actually, because the MD gets his chance to get his feet under the table and really look under the hood of the business and get in amongst it. Just be open and honest about what you see is the future for your business. The sort of, don't be surprised if a new MD, especially if you pick the right person, doesn't do the sort of norms. So, if need be, I'll work Saturday, Sunday. I don't book holiday. I'll take a holiday off when I can. So don't try and constrict him too much. Give him some freedom to be allowed to be creative.
Particularly in a more entrepreneurial, again, owner-managed business.
Exactly.
You want them thinking more like you.
Yeah. And I think that's it, really. I think, as part of the interview process, make sure that you're open and honest. Nothing worse than starting into a business like I did at Salza and then opening the cupboard and see it's full of skeletons, So it's nice if you walk into it with your full, eyes open.
Knowing you've got the right fit and knowing why you're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Good. Okay. What's next then for you and Iracroft? Where would you like to see the business in 3 years' time?
So we've got we've come through a period of being reactive. So since I joined, we had COVID, so we were reacting to that. Then we reacted to the ridiculous swings in material pricing.
Of course.
We reacted to that. We reacted to the fact that demand outstripped our capacity. So we reacted to that. We've now got onto the front foot. So we've now got a 5-year growth plan, which will double the size of the business from 2 years ago. So, and I think that's probably a little bit conservative, to be honest. So, we'll continue to expand. We are the largest employer now in Blandford.
Right.
We do a lot around Blandford now, so we're taking our corporate responsibility a little bit
serious. Employer brand as well.
Employer brand, so we want to be the best employer in the area. We work closely with Blandford School. Yeah. So I'm an enterprise advisor for Blandford School. I go in and help with their Gatsby scores, and we have work experience from the school. We've got 36 kids coming round at the end of June to do a walkthrough. I go to the school and give talks. And then me and my team, on a Friday afternoon, we go en masse to the school and do their interview practice. So for the kids.
Cool. Brilliant.
So
giving back,
we've got to give.
Proper CSR, in my view, is doing something in your local community that benefits all. Yeah,
absolutely. And on last Wednesday just gone, I was at Guy's Mars Prison talking to their employability type people and seeing what we can do there. We may be able to take 1 or 2 ex-offenders in. So I'll be working with them. We've only just started, but I'll be working closely with them to see what we can do there as well. So it's around, it's self-serving because obviously we get our name out there. Yeah. But we do need to engage more with the local community. And
brilliant.
We had our 50th birthday bash in the Crown in Blandford.
Yeah.
220 of my staff. so that was last summer. So that was good fun. Again, it's just using the local area,
resources and businesses, and being part of that community, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I always end with the same kind of final question here, which is a question around success. So, what is your personal definition of success?
Oh dear, I wish you'd asked me that before I came and sat in this seat. I think from a personal point of view, I do enjoy businesses being successful that I'm changing. So I get a real buzz from changing a business to be successful. And that's actually what I look for. That's what I looked for with Hydreco, and that's what I looked for with Iracroft. Yeah. To look at the potential for change, and then as that change comes about, you start feeling more and more successful, and you go down that sort of success path.
Okay.
That's I think that's probably
Good
about it.
person.
And allowing one thing I really have enjoyed at Iracroft is allowing my team to do what they're supposed to do. So I set the vision. I said, right, guys, I want a 5-year growth plan.
Yeah.
My sales guy look at the sales growth for 5 years. My FD does the P&L for 5 years. My ops director realises how many people he's going to need. They all come together, and we put it together, and there's the plan.
Yeah.
And all I've said is I want a 5-year plan. That's it.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy people being able to get into that sort of role and enjoy doing what they're doing, be part of it.
Fantastic. If people want to learn more about you, Darren, more about Iracroft, where can they go? Okay,
I'm all over LinkedIn. Yeah. We've got a nice new website for Iracroft. Please have a look at that. That's it.
Normal places.
The normal places, all the normal places.
Brilliant, Dan. I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's had a wide breadth. There's so much of value in the course of those responses you've given. I've really enjoyed, as I say, the conversation. Thank you for being a great guest on the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you for listening to the Evolve to Succeed podcast. My hope with every episode is that you've learned something new or heard something that challenged your way of thinking and further motivated you on your path towards becoming a more knowledgeable, informed and inspired individual and business leader. If you enjoyed this episode, then please help us by rating, reviewing and subscribing. We really value your feedback and would love to have you along for future episodes. And please don't forget to learn more about Evolve by going to evolvemembers.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.